just got your hot water on at home, so you're really making an effort to show up tonight, which is fabulous. Before we begin, I'm just wondering, are there any reporters in the house? Fabulous. Who are you with?
Moscow Pullman Daily News.
Nice to hear the Moscow Pullman Daily News is here. Thank you so much for the work you do. You guys are essential for our community to know what's happening because not everybody can participate and understand the news. So approximately 45 to about 50 minutes we'll give to the representatives, but if things go faster, like if you two are able to be a little brief with your responses, then we can open it up to all of your audience questions. I do ask that you take some time to write them down. That does two things. It helps you be clear with your questions, and it also prevents us from having to be kind of like, you're mean. So try not to be mean, but be constructive. We love constructive criticism. That's what our country needs. With that said, let's start. Lori, what do you see as a big issue that will arise in the next legislative session?
Well, I think what we are going to see quite a few different issues that we saw last time. And one big issue will be school choice with vouchers or ESA bills. And so I sit on the House Education Committee as the vice chair, and we have not supported the bills that have come forward in the last couple of sessions. And I have a real challenge with pulling monies away from our public education system. And so I don't know if there'll be a difference in the bills that are coming. I have heard that there might be a bill that they bring to House Revenue and Taxation and put a small little paragraph in the bill that would maybe give a tax credit, and so that would bypass the Education Committee. And but we will see. But that is going to be a big topic again, and so I would love to hear your thoughts about that. I know many of you are avid emailers and communicators, and I really have appreciated that from Latah County. You guys are great about communicating. So please communicate on this issue with me and as well with Representative Mitchell, because it is going to be a big topic.
Thank you. Go ahead, Brandon.
So I think I agree with Representative McCann on that. I think there's going to be a lot of different things coming for education. I've been hearing some rumblings about different bills, but I haven't seen any language on them yet. So that's kind of what we're waiting to see. I can tell you one thing that's not going to be a big topic, and that's property tax relief. I just sat in a meeting yesterday, and the property tax relief bill that we passed, the 292, is actually going to distribute quite a bit of property tax, is what the tax commission is estimating. They're estimating about an average of about 22% decrease in property taxes. You'll probably not see about 4% of that, because that's what went to the bonds to take care of a lot of the bonds, but you'll see 17 to 20% coming from the rest of it is what they're anticipating. So I think that's a good thing that's going on. As far as this session coming up, I don't see a whole lot except for a lot of education. I think there's going to be a lot of discussion on the education. One of the things that I'm really working on, I'm trying to work with President Green and President Pemberton to try and figure out is we've got to get rid of the argument over the problems that we're seeing with some of the other universities. And that it's a discussion that's been happening every year. We hear this argument on the floor every year, and it's typically surrounding BSU, and that's kind of the problem that we're running into. And so we're trying to figure out how do we fix that to try and get it so we don't have to argue their bill anymore, so we can just get the bill passed through. I know there's been some rumors that they're trying to split the bills up. President Green thinks that's a bad idea, and I've talked to Representative Carolyn Troy, talked to her a couple of different times. She thinks it's a bad idea also, so I don't think that I'd be in support of anything like that, because they're concerned about what that might do to their actual budget. But if we can find some other way, I've heard that there's a couple of rumblings of bills. I know that I started working on one, but it sounds like they've got one in the Senate that I want to look at before I start actually digging into mine. So I think education is going to be a big thing this year.
Well, Representative Mitchell, while you have the microphone, can you just give us a little bit of background for those who don't know everything? What do you mean by the BSU and the bills?
So one of the problems that we run into, and this actually happened my first year in that I actually seen it really strong, is we had a whole bunch of students come in from BSU, and it was some of the classes that they were requiring. And so we told them, no, you can't require that, and we kind of put an end to that. And then as soon as the budget passed, they brought the classes right back and started requiring them again. And so it's kind of a smack in the face when the legislature says, hey, wait, you need to stop this kind of stuff. And then they just turn around and go right back to it once the legislature set their budget and finished their budget. And so that's kind of the argument that we hear every year. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're just trying to get them to say, hey, there's an issue, let's get it fixed before we can continue moving forward.
And for further clarity, you're talking about critical race theory classes? Is that what's being tied to that?
Yeah, it's kind of critical race theory. They look at it a little bit different in the universities, and what we were hearing from a lot of the students, they were walking away from this class feeling guilty about being white, or feeling guilty because they don't come out completely against other things. And that's kind of the concern that we have, is we don't want to really get students feeling, we want everyone to be treated equal, and that's what it needs to be. So that's what we're trying to work on.
Thank you. Next question is, you have a lot of work to do. You hear from a lot of people. So there are your goals and there are the people's goals. Are they the same? And if you could explain what your goals are and what you're hearing from the people.
So I'll go ahead and start on that. And I think that they are, but what's interesting is to see those that reach out to Representative McCann compared to those that reach out to me. And so we're seeing different things coming across the board. I don't know why that is, but some of the things that we're seeing concerns with is, the library bill's been a big thing they've been talking about. I don't know where that's going to go this year. I know that they are going to bring it back, so we're going to be watching to see what they bring back. It sounds to me like they've put in some different provisions that might be better. I don't know. But some of the things that I'm hearing from some of my constituents, the ones that actually reach out to me, is the pornography that's getting through on cell phones. So there's been a lot of discussion with me about trying to do something like what Utah did. And what Utah did is they actually ran a bill to require that you prove your age if you're going to go to a pornographic website. And they based that all off of the IP addresses. And when they did that, Pornhub actually pulled completely out of all of Utah's IP addresses. They don't even try to go anymore. So that's one of the things that I've been hearing from a lot of people. I've been hearing a lot about the library bill. It's still a hot topic that I'm hearing from people. And then there's still a lot of people that are concerned about our elections, which we took care of most of that last year. I know that I've talked to the Secretary of State about a couple of other things that they want to try and work on. So we'll see what kind of bills they bring, and they've asked me if I kind of help sponsor some of those, because that's kind of been my forte since I got into the legislature. And so working with them pretty close to take care of some of that stuff.
Thank you. Same question. All right. Your goals and the people's goals.
My goals, since I ran, I ran on three major priorities: education, agriculture, and business, and to find policy in all three of those areas that help and promote District 6. So we know agriculture is big in our area. So one of the big bills that I have heard from working with my cattlemen and women across the state is that we have a very huge shortage of large veterinarians in our state. And so I have worked for a couple of sessions that on this topic, because we need to figure out, we don't have a vet school, so we have to get our seats from either the university or Washington State University, or we have to get some from Utah. And so we need more seats, A, and then B, we need some incentives to get our kids to come back to rural Idaho, particularly to work in this field. Many of our young students are saying, yes, I want to be a vet, but they want to be a small vet. A, they make more money, and B, it's a lot easier on their bodies. So we're looking at what would be a kind of balance for the Republican-led legislature that could get through, that we could maybe find some incentives to get these kids back into Idaho, and then encourage them, if they work for a period of time, that there could be some grants or things that they could use towards their loan when they go to school. As we know, it's very, very costly to go to med school. So that is something that I'm working on with my constituencies and with the University of Idaho and their ag folks. So we'll keep you informed on that. It's still, we're trying to work out kinks, but the Kansas State University has a bill that they've worked with their legislature, and there's partnerships. So there's been large vet areas in their state that they were able to help fund this program. So if the legislature could partner and the state of Idaho becomes a partner with some of the businesses, I see that as a win-win, and so we'll keep forging forward on that. But many of my priorities are priorities of you all and folks that I hear from. So I try to balance that. Sometimes I'll hear from such as our chambers of commerce. And again, those are some bills that do affect all of us. So I'm working, and we'll get to that, I'm sure. But there's a lot of different bills, but I really do think my goals match to the constituents here in particular in Latah County.
Well, while you still have the mic, I just want to ask, Representative Mitchell said he hears from different types of people than maybe you do. So what is the delineation there?
Well, it might be that the committees that we sit on.
Okay.
I sit on education, so I hear a lot of education comments from folks from all of or all three of our counties. And Representative Mitchell sits on health and welfare, so he may hear more on those issues than I do because I don't sit on that. So does that answer?
That totally answers.
Okay. Yes.
Well, you did, while you have the microphone, you did mention some bills that you're working on. Let's go ahead and hear about your bills.
Okay, so I'll start with education, and education is truly my passion. And I taught at LCSC for almost 16 years and taught in the career and technical side of the college. So career and technical education is near and dear to me because I learned a lot from hands-on, and many students do. And not all, but when I taught the paralegal program, and I had worked in the legal field for over 30 years before I went, and then taught the paralegal program to say, okay, here's what the book says. This might be what a lawyer might say, but what a lawyer would do and what a paralegal would do are different things. And so I tried really hard to balance the theory and the hands-on so that not only did they understand what real estate law is all about, but they could also prepare deeds and documents that went along with that. And so I have a bill that I'm trying to work with all of the superintendents in our district so that, and you may have heard me say this before because this is a big issue, but we have a beautiful regional technical center in Lewiston that needs to have more utilization from students from Moscow, from Potlatch, from Kendrick, from Culisac, all across our district. And one of the challenges is funding. And so we are funded right now for these students to have, they call it butts in the seat. And when a butt is not in the seat in Moscow and it's in Lewiston, there is some discrepancies in funding. And so I am trying to find and think outside the box to find some answers that we can bring these students down to Lewiston, whether it's a day a week or 2 days a week or an afternoon. I don't know, because we have other challenges with scheduling. Lewiston has an A-B day schedule. Other schools have different scheduling. But I said, that's not insurmountable. We just need to sit down, find a solution. And you've probably heard me say this before. I'm a very solutions-based person, and it could be from my legal background that it's like, let's find the answer, not, let's don't fight about it. Let's find a solution to this problem and fix the problem. So that is one that I don't have it I don't have the answer, but we are certainly working on trying to come up with that. So that's one of the bills. Another bill that is that would fit in the education realm is we have many bilingual instructors in the state of Idaho. And these bilingual teachers are being asked to translate documentation. They're asked to come in the classroom to translate for students, and many of them are not getting paid any additional funding for that. So that is something that I am looking at and working with our superintendent of instruction to see where might that fit. Would it be in discretionary funding, or does this need to be something more specific? But it's a challenge for many teachers, and they don't want to complain, and the teachers that I've talked to, but they are being asked to do an overload. So I said, well, coaches get an overload. Maybe you're not asked to do this every day, but there's got to be something there that we can do to help defray some of that cost. Last year, I was very excited. We kind of silently passed a bill that allows our student teachers to be paid. This year, so now that we've got that in law, Superintendent Critchfield has some monies that she is asking for in her budget to actually fund that. So I'm really excited about the fact that I got to work on that, and hopefully we can get some funding, because now these students are being asked to come to the school to participate and be a student teacher, and they're asked to not work. They don't want them to work other jobs, and some of our rural areas are really having trouble getting students. So we may have a great group of students at the university up here, but they want to go to Moscow or maybe Potlatch, but to get them down to Craigmont, or and LCSC has a good program too, but it's just expensive and they don't have places to live. So those are all issues that we're trying to work on. Let's see, what do we really want to hear about? There's a challenge in the state with last year. There was a funding bill that limited how naloxone and Narcan, the same drug that helps to counteract an opioid overdose. And so the bill, what it did was it said only first responders could have this drug. And so I have been working with the behavioral health folks from Region 2 and talking about it, and so we're trying to broaden who has access to this drug. Not only first responders should have it, but also it should be readily available at a school. It should be readily available to the medical professionals at the universities. It just needs to be broadened, exactly. And so we're going to work on to see how that happens, because appropriation bills, when there is language in them, they go away after that appropriated session is over. So I've been told, oh, it's going to be no problem, but when I pulled the bill or the law, it needs to be broadened in the law. So I'm working on that, and then let's see. Okay, and one that is the mayor here? No, okay. So he and I have talked, I think Representative Mitchell has talked with him, and there's been a lot of challenge up here with some of the funding for the city, and he is like, when we have all of these events for the university and all these people come to town, they still need services. But those services aren't paid for by those people who come to town. So there is a law in place for resort towns, and it's for up to a certain percentage of population, and that population, we're getting closer and closer to the cutoff. So I am thinking that possibly we can add rural university and college towns to that law to allow Moscow, maybe even Lewiston, to be able to get a tax or fee in hotels, as we know. I mean, the word tax right now is a horrible, dirty word, so I'd like to think of another word for that. But for the gratuity, and we all go out of town and we go to a hotel, we can see on the bill, we pay for that, and we don't even think about it. So we may need to do some adjusting there. So I think that would be really helpful for our university towns. So that gives you a little bit of an idea. There's many more that I'm working on, but I think I'll let Brandon take it over if that's okay.
Absolutely.
I can come back to it.
All right, so that's actually a really good question, because when I got done with this session, I said, next year I don't want to run any bills, I just want to go vote and come home. But since then, I've had a lot of different people come to me and ask me to work on a couple of different things. This year was really, really successful for me. I mean, I ran 6 bills, and I had 5 of the 6 actually pass through. Well, technically I only ran 5 because I gave one of those bills to somebody else to pass. But and then one just kind of sat there, and we're working on that one. I'm working on that again, and that has to do with in 2020 they passed House Bill 562, and it all has to do with the homeowner's exemption on a property that goes from a rental to an actual live-in. And what they were doing is they were prorating it, and what the intent of the bill, from what I've been learning, is that it wasn't supposed to be prorated. Well, the confusion is that the counties, some of the counties are thinking that they were prorating the actual tax amount. So let's say it was a $5,000 tax for the year, they were prorating that based on it. That's not what the no proration was about. What the no proration was about was just on the homeowner's exemption. But the language in the bill does not say it that way. So we're working on a fix for that. Right now we got half our counties doing it one way and half of them doing the other way. Can't have that. We've got to get it figured out. The tax commission's been frazzled by it and trying to figure all that out. And then we've got some counties saying, yeah, it works out great. Some counties saying, no, it works out bad. The interesting thing is when we brought this up, we had a lot of counties say we're going to lose millions of dollars. When we actually did the numbers, some counties lost $200, some counties lost $300. Big counties like Ada County, maybe $1,500 what they lost. And so it was really interesting to see that the numbers were not the millions that everyone was talking about. And so we're really working hard to figure that one out. That bill kind of just sat in committee last year. It didn't die, it didn't live, it just kind of sat there because there was no vote taken on it. So that's one that I'm working on to try and get that back. I've already mentioned the pornography bill. We're working on that. Haven't got full language on that yet, so we're not going to see how that actually turns out, but that's one of the things that we're working on, is to try and kill that in the state of Idaho. And it's not going to stop it all the way. I mean, I use a VPN tunnel. My computer thinks I'm in Seattle most of the time. So it's not going to stop it completely, but if we can do anything to kind of protect our kids from that, that's an important move for me. The other thing, the Secretary of State, I met with him, oh heavens, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and he's got a couple of ideas that he wants to run. And I'm not fully on board with everything that he wants to run yet, because I still have to understand what he's trying to accomplish, but there's some bills that he wants me to run, so I'm working on some of that. And that'll kind of be around election integrity. It's a little bit more of election integrity. We do have one concern that just came up, and it's based on House Bill 340 that we passed this year. And that was the voter integrity bill, or more of a, I guess you wouldn't call it as much integrity as it is, we had to get everyone on the same page. So what was happening, and this is what really drove me the first year that I was in, is that on same-day registration, you could register with an Amazon box and a scuba diving card. We didn't think that was okay. So we fixed that, but when we looked at it, we had to fix everything in all of them. So either way you register, you're presenting the same stuff. So now the county clerks understand this is the list of what you can use and what you can't. The problem that we ran into, and I talked to him about that this week, is that on that we allow for a passport, but then it says any government any government issued ID from the federal government. The problem we have is that we now have an administration that's actually pushing to give IDs to those that are not here legally. And so we got to kind of protect our voting rights for that as well. So we're working on something, some language for that. Another one that I'm kind of working on, had a couple of electricians call me up, and I haven't decided how far I'm going to take this yet, because I know I'm going to make some of the HVAC people upset about this. But I don't know if you know what a mini split is, but the mini splits, what happens is HVAC comes, they just put it all up, and then call the electrician up and plug it in. There's no dealing with any of the freon that goes into it, and so the electricians might as well just put it up just as easy. Put it up, wire it in, because they have to wire it in anyway. So I'm working on that, I'm just kind of toying with that a little bit to see where that goes. So, but that's pretty much all that I've got on the plate this year, and then we'll just see what other bills people come and ask me to try and run for them. So we'll see where that goes.
Right. Okay, and just a reminder, we've got cards for questions. Okay, good, we have some already. And while you're bringing that up, I'm just going to ask this from both representatives. What are some things you really wish people would understand about how you do your job?
Thank you for that question. Some of the things that are very challenging, and most of you in here know, I got censured by my committees for taking bad votes that they believed were not following the Republican platform. And I've been asked over and over, who is it that you represent? Do you represent the Central Committee, or do you represent the people? And by far, I represent the people. And the platform for me, yes, it is the principles, many of which we all could probably, even if we're not Republican, could probably agree to some. But you know, I look at it as a guideline, something that we can follow. But when they get down in the nitty-gritty now to say you will vote for this, this, and this, I have a challenge with that, because that doesn't fit everybody. And I represent over 52,000 people in this district. And as we know, Moscow is got quite a few more liberal thinking than perhaps Craigmont or Potlatch. But we have to find that balance and again, find the solutions. And so I was very frustrated by all of that this year. And and when I read a bill, I'm reading it from my background of working in the legal field for over 40 years. And so I'm reading for potential problems that could come down the road. And so I look at it and say, I think we're going to really suffer right here. And so I read that, I question that. And so for an example is the library bill. Do I agree that we should be distributing pornography to children? Absolutely not. That is absolutely ridiculous and is not the whole point. The point, though, was for me is that we have in our platform says local control. The closer to the people is the better people to make the decisions. And so for me, I'm saying we have a library board, we have school boards, we have parents who are number one should be following what their children are reading. Those parents that don't care or don't follow, that this bill wasn't aimed at them. It's really the parents that did follow, and they found some bills, or some books rather, that they were very uncomfortable with. I wouldn't want my child to read maybe that book either, but that is me as a parent, and that would be my choice or your choice for your children. And I felt very strongly, who am I? I am just a regular person like you, and that is saying and then I look at Brandon and say, how dare you allow your child to read such terrible books? Well, that's not my place. And I believe that's the parent's place. And if the parent is upset with the book, I've talked to every single library in our district, and every single library has a policy to deal with that. And so for me, that's where I had to come down on with that bill, and therefore was censured for my votes. But I'm going to stand strong on that, and I was asked, are you going to change your vote now that you're censured? And I was really offended by that. And I said, if I give up my integrity, what else do I have left? So I said, if I get the very same bill with the very same content to do what those bills were going to do to our librarians, then you're going to get the same vote. So that is what I would just like people to understand, that there's a lot more to it than just following somebody's saying vote, and have marching orders. And I really take pride in the fact that I read every bill, and my husband can attest, there are times when I'm calling him at 3 in the morning and I'm reading bills, I'm still awake, why are you awake? I can't sleep. I'm just still reading bills.
So I appreciate that answer. There's a lot of things that that I wish that a lot of people knew about what's going on, and I'm going to say a couple of words, and most of you will probably understand. And it's only a bill, and it's from a cartoon years ago. And we have so many people, especially our younger generation, that come out to Boise and have no idea how a bill is ran, where it's going, when they need to step up and say something. I think that that's important that we move on, and I've actually talked to Superintendent Critchfield about how do we get that education back in where they're teaching stuff like that, so that people understand where the bills are at and where they're going. I know there's a couple in here that I recognize that have got on and actually testified on bills, and I think that's important that we hear the people's voice and what they're actually talking about, because that's how we have to make decisions. I think another thing that I'd like to share that has really kind of bothered me quite a bit, especially this year, I've noticed it really, really strong. And that's every night we seem to have some kind of a dinner or something, one of the groups is taking us out for a dinner. And I'll be sitting there at my dinner table with a bunch of other legislators, and 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock comes around, and I go, well, I got to get up and go. I've got some bills to read. And I've had legislators actually look at me and say, you actually read those? And I'm like, yeah, you need to. And so I think it's really important. One of the things that I really focus on, and this will kind of give you guys an understanding so that you know when to reach out or what might be going on. We don't really look at the bills until they get out of committee unless it's in our committee. When it hits our committee, then we're really focused on it. But what happens is once it hits the second reading calendar, that's when I actually look at the bill. I start reading it, I start getting to know it, and the reason is because the next day it might get moved to the third reading calendar, so I've got to be ready for it. But the big thing is that I'm prepared on that day I kind of know where my vote needs to go, unless I start hearing from more people saying, wait, we don't like this, or we do like it, or whatever. And then when it's on the third reading calendar is when we actually get the opportunity to vote on it. We had a bill this year, and this is one of the things that I think is really important to let people know about. I got a phone call, I got a text message about halfway through the debate on a bill. We were debating it, it was ready to be voted on. We thought for sure it was going to go through. And as soon as I got that, I was able to stand up on the House floor and make a couple, I made a couple of phone calls first, but then stand up and say, this is a problem with this bill. And we actually killed the bill on the House floor while it was being debated. Because someone was paying enough attention to reach out and say, hey, this is what this bill actually does, you need to be careful with that. And so I think it's important that the public watch what's going on, because if you see something and I get an email pop up or a text message or whatever the case may be, there are bills that we can kill on the House floor, and we've shown that this year with one of the bills that we had. So I think that's what I would say is one of the important things that I would like to share.
So what I'm hearing you both pretty much say is that people need to pay attention and participate? Okay. And not just us white hairs? I got a streak.
Yes.
Encourage everybody to. There are a lot of great questions from the audience. I see a theme here of like education and then schooling and the veterinarian, but I want to start with this question. How do you plan to address the inevitable rapid growth of the state's aging and disabled population? I mean, if you need a moment, that's the big one. Yeah, there's what you can say. Plan to address.
Lori, please repeat the question.
Okay, the question is, how do we plan to address the inevitable rapid growth of our state's aging and disabled population?
Thank you.
Yes, and so this is a definitely a challenge, and in some communities more so than others. I've attended a couple of meetings down in Lewiston where it is looking at the aging population and how the age of the people moving into Lewiston is this, and then our kids is doing this. And so it's a converging look, and it is a challenge because we're not growing up here like they are in the Treasure Valley. So we have to be cognizant of that we are looking at more retirees moving into our areas. And And one of the issues that I've talked with this group about is that the housing crunch for the elderly. And so there maybe our aging population are still living in their homes, and they may be split level, they may be really not conducive to the elderly, but they don't have anywhere to go. And they're not really ready for a full-on nursing home. And we're not lucky in many of our areas like they have up in Spokane, those transition areas. And maybe we need to take a look at finding more opportunities to find those and build those for our communities. The disabled challenge is a challenge everywhere, and that again is housing, medications, and Brandon's committee with health and welfare. You've seen in the papers where there's been a lot of challenges looking at Medicaid and how to bring that budget into a sustainable budget, because it continues to rise, and so the costs are really through the roof. But we need to also know that it is our responsibility as a state to look out for those folks who are a little bit less fortunate and disadvantaged. And so I know that's not an answer, it's a long way around. I don't want it to sound like a politician answer, because it truly is in my heart, and I joined as a non-voting member of the behavioral health group because I want to learn more about the needs in our areas. And I attended a meeting where a young person was at St. Joseph's Hospital almost for 3 weeks in the emergency room on some of the side room, because they had nowhere in the state. There were no beds for this young man and who was in this extreme crisis, because they couldn't put him up in the population with the adults up on the 5th floor for mental health. So mental health is another really big issue that I'm trying to wrap my hands around, and because my heart, it does go out to these folks, and we need to figure out a way to be smart, to be fiscally responsible, but yet be human. So, very good.
So that's a good question, actually. And I want to preface a couple of different things. I sat through a meeting where they were talking about one of the issues we're having as a nation. It hasn't hit us here in Idaho as quick, but it is going to hit us, and that's with the youth. For every couple, we're supposed to have 2.1 children for every couple, and we're at 1.8 is what we're at. So we're heading down a road where we're not going to have the younger generation, but we're going to have the older generation. And so it's going to be an interesting fix that we're going to have to figure out. I don't know what the fix is. I can tell you that, and this is kind of a funny story, sometimes we get looked at wrong. This year on health and welfare, they actually gave me the budget that was the portion for adult disabilities. And so I met with the group that covers that section, and we sat down and we talked about their budget, and we were trying to figure out, okay, is it the right budget? Do you need more? Do you need less? And she walked out after our meeting. We had a great meeting. She walked out, and then I walked out to go to lunch, and she come running up behind me and says, I heard you were supposed to cut my budget. I said, no, I'm not supposed to cut it. I'm supposed to know what's in it. I'm supposed to understand it. And so we didn't cut their budget. We gave them what they were asking for because she needed it, and I was totally good with that. Last week I attended a meeting that she actually put on in Boise called We Care, and it's about adult disability. And I got to meet a lot of the people that live right here in my own district. There's a couple at home, or that live in their own home, that want to live there, and I think that's important. The problem that they're running into, and I think that this is a conservative approach, but the problem they're running into is that they're not getting enough funding to bring in that part-time person to come in and help out when they can, or when they need to. And so what's happening is, in my view, it would be a very good conservative way to do things if we could provide more to those families that want to stay in their own home, that want to be able to do for themselves. This couple, it was really interesting because they've got, the gentleman mostly has a really bad, I mean, he can't even talk hardly at all. The wife had to translate everything, which was awesome, but he was so talkative about it. But he works a job that he's been working for 25 years. She works up at the University of Idaho, and so they both have a good job, but they're still not making it with being able to get someone to come in and help with that. And I think that's one of the things we need to look at is how can we distribute enough to the families that are trying to stay at home, because it'll save us from having to have a whole, I guess, I don't want to say company, but a whole department that we're paying if you've got some people that are willing to go into these homes and help out. So I think that's one of the things we can look at, but it is a big problem that we got to figure out an answer to, and it's not going to be an easy overnight answer.
Thank you. So one of the questions from the audience is about an older adult child who needs care and that the caregiver industry needs some help with payment. This particular person was not approved, so they cannot pay for their needs. So I hear what you're saying, and then I have a question that back to the audience then is you cannot expect representatives to come up with all the answers. So do you have proposals and ideas that you then email them because you live this life, and you could send them bullet points on what you think would be directly able to address those issues? If funding is one, how do we tax to get that funding for disabled folks, right? So it's one thing to just say, help me, we need more money, and this industry sucks and we're all getting old. But it's another to say, if you want young people to come in the country, I think we need to do this to make Idaho attractive and give them these bullet points so they have some more oomph to get through there, right? Okay, so we got that part of the caregiving. It is on your radar. There are no answers, no ideas yet. That's very frustrating. I'm so sorry. What are your thoughts regarding doctors leaving Idaho because of recently passed legislation regarding abortion, transgender health care? That's a tough question, and I know it's very emotionally charged, but really at the bottom of it, it is just health care. There's not enough doctors in Idaho. Is it the same kind of answer? Working on it?
Well, I can say that there's a group of women, and I don't know what we're going to call ourselves, Republican Women for Women's Health, possibly. And we as women recognize that we need to stand up for women's health. And I being a pro-life woman, though, I believe strongly that we need exceptions. We need to look at expanding in those areas, because it's so narrowly focused right now that doctors are very afraid that what they are doing to practice medicine and what they have went to school to learn and to help and all this, that they cannot practice medicine. And so we as a group of women are going to try really hard to move the needle again. We moved it a little tiny bit, just such a fraction that I wanted to vote against it, but I thought it is a little bit. And that is how it's going to happen in the state of Idaho, small increments. But I really think we all need to stand together that if we do not help and we do not fund more seats for our kids going into the WWAMI program, we need to continue that program. We need to encourage our kids to go to medical school. And so it's kind of like the vet situation. We don't have enough seats. We don't have enough residencies. And it costs money, and it takes a big coordinated effort, and I applaud Jeff Sigmiller and his group up here at the university and what they're doing, and I will support that 100%. And I will support that we have to look at protecting these women, and we have to do a better job. And for women to say, I have to leave the state to have a baby, it breaks my heart. And we've closed up at Bonner, up in North Idaho, we've closed, where there was another clinic and closed down in the Emmett area. So it is a huge concern for me. I've reached out to the Idaho Medical Association and their reps and said, how can I help? How can I make a difference in the legislature, knowing that this is a Republican conservative legislature, but we need to appeal to practicalities of we just have to, and it is a crisis, and it's gonna be a bigger crisis if we don't. So I'm looking forward to working with these other ladies about this, because it is, we need to protect our women in the state.
So my answer is actually, it would be simple except for the way that the funding works. And I think that we need to have, I would love to see WWAMI pulled out of the WWAMI program and actually do their own school here for doctors. Because typically when you have doctors, where they learn, they usually like to stay. And so I'd really like to see something like that. Is it possible? Probably not, because of the cost that's going to be involved. And this year is going to be an interesting year when it comes to costs, because we don't have the same surplus that we've had the last couple of years. So we're going to be pretty tight on some things this year. So I think that that's our biggest thing, is how do we actually get them taught in the state where they'll stay? Because like I said, it's a huge number that actually stay where they're training. And so that would be my answer to something like that. I know that we did pass, Representative McCann actually mentioned that we did pass a bill this year to try and help a little bit with the doctors, because the doctors used to have to prove their innocence. Well, now we're telling them, no, you use your best judgment. If it's the right thing to do, if the mother's life's in jeopardy, you use your best judgment. And so that law passed through, and that kind of helped out in that area. Did it help out enough? I don't know. The fruits are still out to see what's happening with that. I know that I've been in contact with Mr. Siegmiller over there at WWAMI. I like to call him Jeff because we're really good friends, but and he's been kind of keeping track of that and helping me understand what is really happening with the doctors. And some of the stories that we hear are not always dead on, but some of them are. And so we got to figure out what the best way to do that is, or where to fix that is.
Okay, so we go from that to, do you want to go to education or judicial? Which one do you want first? Let's go education. Okay, educational questions. Do you support funding K through 12 on attendance or enrollment?
Well, for me, that one is a pretty black and white question, because given what we've seen through the pandemic, I think we need to look at an enrollment based. Are we going to get past the session? What I heard out of the governor's office, it would be a cold day and you know where for that to get passed. But to help my situation that I mentioned to you about the CTE and getting kids from all over our area, that would make a huge difference if we could fund enrollment-based versus ADA-based. I will keep trying. I will keep trying to convince the governor that it is a good plan. However, he sees what's going on across the river from Lewiston and Washington, where if you, they basically say you don't need to come to school. If you can pass this test, you don't need to come to class. And so that, you know, they have like 50% attendance rates over in Clarkston, across the river. And so that didn't help. When we were at a meeting and the superintendents were there, I looked out and Lance Hansen, who's the superintendent of Lewiston, looked at me and kind of raised his eyebrows like, oh, that's not gonna help, is it? I'm like, no, that's not gonna help us. So for me, enrollment would be, I would like to see it enrollment based.
See, I think this is where Representative McCann and I differ a little bit, and a lot of that is because I lived over in Washington State for a while. And I've seen what that does with our students actually making it to class. I think it's important that, you know, we sat down with all of our superintendents here in Latah County, and I actually asked the question, when have we gotten to the point, you know, when I was a kid, I went to school all the time. And then COVID came around and this kind of changed a lot of the landscape. So now people are calling in sick and just saying, I don't feel like going. So it's happening in the workforce, it's happening in the schools. So there's a concern with that and where that might go if we're not so-called butts in the seats. You always said that, so we'll go with it. So I think that that's important. Figuring out the funding mechanism, that, I mean, I can see where the schools are struggling with that, and so that might be something we have to look at, is how we actually fund our education, but I'd still like to see it with the kids that are actually going in the class.
I just had an idea. What if it was based on enrollment, but there's a caveat that attendance was at least 75% or they didn't graduate? So it's back on them, but the money comes, I don't know, just throw that out. Another education question, of last year's funding bills for schools, what bills will come up again? Of last year's funding bills, I feel like I'm on a quiz show. Last year's funding bills for schools, what bills will come up again?
I'm not exactly sure what question you were thinking of, is if there was something that did not pass for funding bills, but we this year will see, the same types of appropriation bills coming out of the department from the superintendent of public instruction, and to fund K-12. And that's one budget, and then the other budgets are to fund our higher education. And I supported all of those bills because I, again, am very passionate about education, and I see the higher ed budgets they've gone down over the last, if you look at it historically what's happened, we used to fund higher ed at a much higher rate. And I believe that we need to continue funding our higher education, and whether a student wants to do more in-demand career and do CTE programs, or whether they're going to go to be a doctor. We need all of them. So we need to open that spigot, open that availability to students to be able to maneuver around in the education realm, because there are so many opportunities. And again, I go back to some of these kids who will not go on to higher ed, and our go-on rates in the state are not good. However, Moscow, you guys rock, and your kids go on at a much higher rate than do most of the other districts around the state. But so those same funding bills, the same bills are going to come. We're going to have a bill to try to fund WWAMI, and it was a huge fight on the floor to pass the WWAMI budget because there was concern by some of the very extreme right legislators that there could be a course that they may have to take that might talk about an abortion and how to do an abortion. So I was very disgruntled. I stood up on the floor and I asked very pointedly, do any of you have sisters, daughters, grandmothers, aunts? Because if you have them, they are going to have a problem at some point in time. I want to have a doctor that knows how to do these things or has learned. And so that was a big fight on the floor, and we did get it passed by not a huge margin, but we're going to continue to see these same fights on the floor of both the House and the Senate with these spending bills. And I remind my fellow Republicans and my Democrat friends that I say we are one of the fastest growing states in this country. And people are not saying, I want to come to Idaho and I don't need your services. They're saying, we want these services, so we have to provide those services. And so some of those budgets had small increases, and they still voted no, because it was an increase in the budget. And I got very frustrated, and I try very hard to say, okay, I'm trying to think fiscally responsibly because I am a Republican, and I want to think about your money, that it is your tax dollars. It's what you have earned hard and had to pay to the state, and so we need to be very respectful of that and judicious. But there are services that people demand. So it's a balancing act, and we try very hard to look at that, and all of us are hearing from folks like you, and we want to hear more from folks like you to give us that input and saying, yes, we do want those services. Because I'm not hearing people say, I don't want the service, so we don't need that. But is a big balancing act. So I don't know that that answers it, because I don't know specifically what bill maybe you're thinking should come back or will it come back, but we can talk more afterwards if you want to bring that up. Good idea. Yeah.
So I can probably make this easy. You asked which funding bills will be coming back? All of them. The only purpose that we have out in Boise really is to fund the different departments and fund the state. So our whole purpose is to make sure that the bills are paid. All this other stuff just comes with us being out there waiting for the budgeting process to get through. And that takes some time. This year they're doing a little bit different. They've actually started already working on a bunch of stuff, and they're actually going to do the bills a little bit different, which is going to make it easier, I think, for us as legislators to recognize what's going on. It might, depending on how they write them up, it might look to the public like we're cutting different things, but that's because they're not going to be showing the one-time spends from the money that we receive from the federal government. So all that's going to be taken out of there. So it might look like we have they gave me an example of one bill that we had a 23% decrease on it, but what they're going to be showing is a 2.8% increase, because they're not going to be showing that one-time money that's already been taken out. So it's going to make it a lot easier for us to see and recognize what's going on. Because when that one-time money came in, that was one of our biggest concerns, is when we have that, what are we spending it on? Is it really going to be a one-time spend? And give you a little bit of an example, I actually met with DEQ yesterday, and it was really refreshing to listen to what they said, because one of our concerns that we see is the more money we take from the federal government, because the federal government just prints it. They can go across the street and print some more. We can't. But the more money we take from the federal government, the deeper in debt we're getting for our kids and grandkids and on down the road. Well, DEQ had an opportunity to take in, I think it was like $25 million, and they had to put it towards something to make for energy. And so what they ended up doing is they said, they looked at it and they said, first off, do we really want to take it? And they thought, well, if we don't, someone else is going to. And so they took it, but what they're doing is they're putting it into the schools. They're going to find a way to put it into the schools to be able to repair some of the problems we have in schools. And I asked them, I said, so how are you going to figure out which schools to go to? And I said, I don't know, we're looking for suggestions. And so I told them, what they do in Wyoming, I love what they do in Wyoming, because they put a pot of money aside every year. And every year they have an independent person go out and check the schools. Which one needs it the most? And as you all know, our schools here are, I don't even want to say aging, they're aged. We've got old schools that need to have some things fixed. So when I mentioned that to them, I said, that's a good idea. So I'm hoping they'll take an approach like that and look at where that money can be spent. So, but in answer to it, an easy answer is, yeah, we got to fund it.
Right. All right. So, how are y'all? Are we all doing okay? Okay. Good. Okay. Representative McCann, wouldn't or would? Hold on, just a second. Wouldn't the launch grant program help fund the education of future veterinarians?
Yes, and thank you. The launch program is a new program that we passed this year, passed by only one vote in the House, and then there was some back and forth, and then came back to the House, and we did get it through. And yes, you are right, because veterinarians are on the list of in-demand careers for Idaho, that a child or a student could utilize those grant funds, about $8,000, and they could utilize that going to a college of their choice to take in Idaho, thank you, in Idaho, the pre-vet programs, and maybe they would take courses that would let them be a vet tech, so that then they can actually go and work that job and then continue their education with other grant funds or scholarship funding. The launch program is a program that we allow our students to look at a list and say, okay, these are the in-demand careers that have been determined by the Department of Labor and the state of Idaho. And they're ranked, and so a student then can sign up for this launch program. And if you have kids that are seniors, this is a wonderful opportunity, and particular for kids who may not have chosen to go on to college and say, say, yeah, I really am interested in welding, and I can do a lot of welding on the ranch. Well, they can go get a welding certificate at our colleges, or they can take a workforce training course and get certified in aluminum welding or TIG welding or whatever other weldings there are out there, and there's a lot of them. And the jobs are plentiful. And so that's just one of many, but it has to be on that career, in-demand career list. And I went with the Lieutenant Governor last week to schools in District 6, and it was fabulous. We went to, we were able to go to Potlatch because they were still opened, and we talked with Moscow already, and then we went on to Kendrick. Every senior in Kendrick High School had signed up. There were 28 of them. They all had signed up for this. And I was like, okay, these kids are on top of this. These folks are helping these kids understand that they need to look at something for their future. And more so than just, you know, McDonald's right now it's paying pretty darn good. But, you know, a lot of these kids, they think, well, I can't go, I can't afford it. Well, now we're giving them a leg up. It's not a free ride. It's a leg up to help them become citizens, to become economic drivers in our state by paying taxes, by being citizens that they can be proud of themselves. So those kids were so excited, both at Potlatch and at Kendrick. The Kendrick kids just had more exposure to it before we got there, so it was very exciting. So yes, in a long way around that school, the first part of it, certainly these dollars could be utilized.
And then Representative Mitchell, the question is, did you vote to support the launch bill?
So I actually didn't vote to support it, and I had my own concerns on it, and there were several concerns that I had. First off, it didn't have sideboards on it. I was concerned about what kids we were going to be giving it to, because I worry that if we have a kid that's barely graduating from high school and then going on to something bigger, are they going to be able to make it in school? I had a lot of people actually reach out to me on this one. As a matter of fact, we had one of the biggest employers in Idaho come out strong against it, saying, no, we don't need that, because when you start a program like that, and we learned that with Medicaid expansion, when you start a program like that, it grows and grows and grows and gets out of control. And right now, we brought Medicaid expansion up earlier, and when we voted on that, we were told that it would hit about $500 million by 2030. We passed $1.2 billion this year. It grows, and it's concerning on that aspect. When the bill came back for the fixes that were on there, I voted in favor of that, because I felt that it fixed a lot of the concerns that we had in the first place, and it dropped it from 8,500 down to 8,000. So it slowed down the growth of what that program might turn out to. So in the original bill, no, I didn't vote for it. In the second bill, yes, I did vote for it.
I mean, you bring up a good point, because you start something and it gets very, very expensive, but like when I think about giving the young people an opportunity to go into trade and have that offset by just a little bit for the cost, then they're opt to stay here and build more houses and be more secretaries and be more vet techs, and then they pay into the Idaho taxes, which then give you more money to fund the old people who are going to need it. I mean, I'm just looking a little bit further down the road, but I know you voted for it the second time. Okay, let's go with the legislative question, because this person has amazing handwriting and I'm going to do my best. In the upcoming session, will you protect or protest? Protest?
Protect for the handwriting.
I know, right? I'm sorry, it's me, it's my glasses. Will you protect judicial impartiality by resisting anticipated proposals to minimize or eliminate merit-based appointments to fill judicial vacancies by centralizing? Say it again, louder. It is really nice.
Vacancies by
Centralizing? Incentivizing.
centralizing judges, is that what that's?
judges, yeah, who resign or retire before the end of their term. This is when we should trust the people to ask the question themselves, but because people are sometimes emotional, we
And then eliminating the other judicial council, which evaluates candidates and puts judges on partisan ballots.
I'll take it, okay.
I'll try.
All right. Okay, the first part,
Rephrase, yes.
for the first part, in the session, will you protect judicial impartiality? I think judicial impartiality is extremely important. And I would not support proposals to make judicial races partisan. We want our judges to remain impartial. We don't want to say, oh, you're a Republican judge, and we're seeing what is happening on the federal level. And the Supreme Court should not be battered around based on ideology and politics, because it's so important for our judicial branch, our executive branch, our legislative branches to stay separate. And when we are trying to force our judges to run as a Republican or a Democrat, we are putting politics into our judges, in my opinion. I voted very much strongly against the challenges that were faced a couple of sessions ago with the Idaho Judicial Council. I vehemently was opposed to what they were asking in that bill, was to have attorneys write their name. Bill McCann Jr. says that Attorney A is a piece of blah, and basically they wanted these attorneys to come out with their name, and they just were not going to get they're not going to get the responses from attorneys by forcing them to do that. And the whole purpose is be honest. Tell us what you think about candidate A, B, and C. Do you believe that they fit the mold and what we want in our judiciary? So if you're asking these attorneys to put their name on something, and maybe it's negative, and that particular judge gets into office, then what? You have to work with those judges, and you can't help but. So, from my legal background, I was very against it. This might have been an area that I don't think a lot of the legislators really understood how important the Judicial Council is in selecting our judges and helping. And there was a lot of political balls up in the air, and I was getting calls on the floor like you can't imagine. Please, you can't vote for that. I'm like, no, wait a minute. I worked in the legal field for 40 years. Are you kidding me? I'm not going to support this. I understand it completely and how important this is. So I took a big stand against it. The bill passed, but the governor vetoed it. And there was another bill that passed this last time, but when I did a little legwork, I was told everything was fine, and then I find out later it's not fine. So we need to revisit the challenges and fix what isn't working.
All right, so let me see if I can answer this.
Well, you're thinking, should I adjust this tablecloth? Is that bothering you?
I'm the guy that's OCD up here. It was bothering me.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I think if you focus on those two,
Well, so I can tell you that I think that judges need to be neutral, and I don't think we should be looking at them from a political lens. I worry sometimes that I think that what needs to happen is we need to have the Judicial Council needs to look at the judges on are they going to be able to judge fairly and impartial, and are they going to be able to follow the Constitution? Because we've had a couple of concerns with some of the judges not following the Constitution, or at least in our opinion they didn't. And then I've got a really good friend of mine that's actually got appointed by Governor Little as a judge down in Lewiston. And so I talked to him about a lot of these different things. And he and I think a lot alike, but he's very, very impartial when it comes to actually what he does in the seat. So I don't think they should be, represented as Republicans or Democrats. Eliminate the Idaho Judicial Council. I don't think we need to eliminate that. I think that they're doing the best job they can, just like legislators have to. I mean, we get in there, we address everything we possibly can, and same thing with the council. The concerns that I end up with any councils is when we actually give them the ability to pass laws, and that's a concern that I have because it's the legislature's responsibility. And so, but I don't think that they pass any laws, so to speak. They just kind of give some guidance and direction.
Right. Now let's talk about taxes. What is your position on local option sales tax to promote local infrastructure?
That's the first tax question. Okay, so I've done a bit of legwork on this because I've been asked by folks in Lewiston and up here in Moscow to consider bringing a bill on local option tax to allow the city of Moscow, if you want to tax yourselves, why shouldn't you be able to do that? And I took it to a group of legislators to ask them, and some that have been around a while, and some of the answers I got were really surprising. And as I learned more about it, I think we have to be careful, and for this reason. So if we have a local option tax of 1%, even if it's just 1% up here, and the local tractor folks want to sell me a tractor. So those tractors are pretty expensive, and if the tractor is not totally exempt from tax, I believe then what would happen is that if that were me and I was going to pay an extra 1% for local option tax, I might go down to Lewiston where there's not a local option tax and buy that same tractor. So as I started looking and diving more into this, I thought, okay, I see that could be a problem. So if we are going to do that, we need to either have a cap, or there needs to be something in place so that we don't deter our people from buying locally. And because then we are just kicking that can down the road and it's not doing what we want. In fact, it's even damaging. So that's one thing, because I said I'm happy to look at it, because for me as a citizen before I came here, I thought, why not allow Lewiston? Let them do this. If they want to tax themselves, they should be very able to do that. Then I start looking at those unintended consequences, and that's one of them. I think there's still some room for us to look at a local option tax, but we need to be careful in doing it that we don't, like I said, deter me from buying that tractor and having whatever sales that would be equated to the city go somewhere else.
So I go up to Spokane quite often, and Spokane has a local option tax. They just went there. They just took their taxes up to 10% in Spokane. So I try not to buy anything in Spokane. Actually, I try not to buy anything in Washington State. Period. As a matter of fact, my gas, when I drive to Oregon, I always make sure I'm full here, and I get filled back up when I get to Oregon, because of the cost of different things. So I have a lot of concerns with the local option tax, just because of what it might do to the community. I agree with Representative McCann. I mean, like I said, I don't go to Spokane and buy anything anymore because I don't like the tax they've got on that. So would it drive things away from our community? Possibly could. So that would be my concern on that.
One more thing on that is that if there was something specific, like Lewiston was able to add, I don't know if it was 0.25%, 0.5%, or something to build their jail. And so if that ended up being something that Moscow needed, we could, there are other ways around to try to fund something. And some areas have an auditorium district, and so, we need to talk about some of those things that could help Moscow.
So this is different than the idea of like university towns being a part of the tourism. Okay, but that money, that tax money would then come back to Moscow, or, okay, great. All right, interesting. So another task, based on statistics, according to this person, almost half of sales in Idaho are exempt due to legislative, I don't know that word, and exemptions. Would you
Legislative adopted exemptions.
legislative adopted exemptions. Would you support review and possible getting rid of these exemptions to Idaho sales tax?
So this is a question that comes up a lot, and there are a lot of exemptions. And I think that they should routinely be reviewed. And, some of those constituencies that do have exemptions will fight against any changes. But I honestly, some of those have probably been in place for a long, long time. And so I believe that a review is something that we should do. Maybe we take X amount every year, look at them, and discuss them in a committee that is dealing with that. Maybe revenue and taxation should be looking at that every year. But yes, I would support reviewing. I don't know, I couldn't give you an example of one I would totally be in agreement to take away, but I know there's a long laundry list of exemptions that we should take a look at.
And I agree. I think that it's important that we always keep track of what's going on and following through. And I think that, legislature every year, we go through the rules review, and we have to review all the rules. If it's a fee rule, we end up having to vote on it in the House and in the Senate to be able to get it passed through. This would be the same basic idea. We have to be able to review what's going on that side of things so that everyone's paying their fair share and that exemptions aren't damaging. So I agree with that.
Right. Love the purple pen, by the way, of that question. Okay, are you both aware of the FMAP change? FMAP, I don't have my phone to tell me what that is. Family medical, no.
Brandon
The what?
knows.
FMAP.
FMAP, which stands for,
Federal.
Yeah, it's the federal matching funds for Medicaid.
Okay.
Federal Matching
Yeah.
Funds for Medicaid.
Okay. Thank you. Now that we know FMAP, so, we are we have been charged as a legislature to fund Medicaid. And so I don't know how, I guess if the federal government gives us X, Idaho has to put in Y, and we match those funds. And, I'm not on that committee, but I would be for looking at how much of a match is it? Is it something that we can sustain and afford? And so, I would have to know. I'm not on that health and welfare committee, and I would be the first to tell you that is probably the weakest area in my repertoire.
Thanks for being honest.
Because I don't know a lot about Medicaid.
They can talk to you about it.
And so I would love to, and Brandon might be able to answer this better because he's in that committee, but, federal dollars a lot of times come with strings. I'm not against federal dollars, but I feel that we have to make sure that we can sustain it and we can afford it. So that would probably be the best I could answer that without knowing a little bit, understanding it a little more.
And I'm kind of in that same boat. I need to understand a little bit better as well. I know that it's been talked about. I know that we've got a committee right now that's looking at a lot of the Medicaid and how it's funding and whether we want to go to a different style. I don't know. So that would be something I'd have to learn a lot more about.
Okay, cool. At least we're on this.
Maybe the gentleman citizen, will tell you about it a little more. All right, so there's 2 more questions left for this evening. Climate change, agriculture, and water in Latah County. How could you legislate for water protection? The second part of the question I think you answered earlier, which was the need for adequate funding for school building repair. I think Mr. Mitchell did that. So back to protecting water.
Well, we all know that particularly up here, the aquifer is going down, and there's no question we need to take some proactive steps to protect the water here and to get water either to recharge into that system and I've spent a little time with the mayor and others who are more knowledgeable about this situation. And it's my understanding we're looking right now at pumping water from the Snake River and sending it across in big pipes to get into for usage. Now, they didn't say it was for recharge, but I think we also need to look at recharge to see, okay, how can we recharge this aquifer? Is it by not utilizing as much water and let it recharge and utilize the water coming from a pipe from wherever it's going to come out of the Snake River? So, but I am aware that this is a huge issue up here, and aware that it is something we need to continue to have conversations, and how do we help fund that? And so there are federal grants, again, federal dollars, but there are federal grant monies that are available to help in those arenas. And so, and I know these gentlemen that I chatted with, that they are more aware of all of that than I am. I just said, you let me know how I can help at the State House, and I will jump right on board, because we do need to look at that. Our water issues up here are substantially different than the water issues down in southeast Idaho, but they're no less, because when the aquifer continues to go down and we continue to build, and it's going to be a crisis if we don't figure this out. And so I was happy to be part of the conversation, and said I want to be part of more conversations to understand more. And again, we are just citizens, and we know a lot about some things and not a lot about other things. But I'm willing to learn no matter what it is, and that's why I joined the behavioral health. That's why I took a tax policy course this summer, because I do want to learn, and areas that I don't understand, I will do my darndest to understand, so that I can be a helpful voice for you all down in Boise.
And I think I agree there with I think the only thing that we can really legislate, we have to wait until the experts actually share what their plans are. And at that point, we just legislate. It's probably going to be more of the funding aspect than anything, because we're not the experts on it. We have to listen to those that understand it, and that come up with the right ideas. And then we can look at them and determine if it's a cost-effective way to do it.
So I know the person who asked that question was asking how to legislate for water protection, but I just wanted to share with you some things I learned from, I'm going to get this wrong, Palouse Conservation. They had a couple who worked with, and I believe they got some grant money through the USDA to take part of their land and make it back to what it was pre-colonial, and turn it into watershed, and turn it into marshes again. And they actually brought in, can you imagine having fun cutting down trees and purposely laying down logs to purposely slow down the water so it doesn't rush away, to give the soil a chance to absorb, that then goes down into the aquifer. And that, I think, was like maybe something like 10 acres that this private citizen decided to do and protect. And then out there outside, or near Bullville or Vassar Meadows, if you ever go get your Christmas tree there for $5, when you get another private landowner, I saw some excavation, and I was honestly worried they were building more houses, but no, they were making marshland that used to exist here in the past, including beavers, to keep the water going down to the aquifer. So then, I don't know, I'm just saying, private citizens reaching out to organizations to get this problem solved so you don't have to have things legislated is kind of a cool idea. It might be a little bit faster. And on another note, it will be faster. Change your toilets. Get the better toilets. There should be a discount coupon for you. Yeah, and can we start building up? Nobody asked that question. How do we legislate building up? Maybe a little more. Okay. The last question tonight is, how do you represent constituents who you don't agree with?
That's a really great one. Thank you for asking that. So, for me, it's I come back to my background where I worked in the legal field, and there were definitely times when clients would come in, I totally didn't agree with them. But we were there to find solutions and find them some help. And I take that same stance with constituents when they reach out to me, and if I don't agree, I will say thank you. I see it in a little bit different lens, and I try to find the solution, find the common ground that we do have, and then try to move forward from there to find something that might work for both of us or for all of us. And so being a Republican and representing a lot of independents, unaffiliated, and Democrats, I work really hard to listen to everyone and try to find the common ground. I have a lot of people, when I was walking down shaking hands at the homecoming parade, I had people say, I'm a Democrat and I didn't vote for you, but I have such high respect for you. Thank you for standing up for people. Thank you for looking out for everyone. And so that meant a lot to me, because we may disagree on things, but again, we don't disagree on everything. And that is part of my challenge with my own colleagues. Is I said, Republicans come in all shapes and sizes, and we all sit somewhere along this line. And I said, my favorite Republican president, because probably he was the very first president I ever got to vote for legally, was Ronald Reagan. And he said, Republicans have a big house, and we should all be able to fit under this tent, but we need to be able to get along civilly and respond together. And that's what I try to tell some of the colleagues that I have, that I say, we need to compromise, and they honestly believe compromise is a bad word, and they will dig their heels in and not compromise. And I said, we can't make good policy if we can't compromise. So that's how I try to deal with folks that I may not necessarily agree with.
So I'm kind of similar on that. This year it's been interesting. Well, the last couple of years, every year we have members from here in Moscow that come out and visit with the legislators. And I always sit down and visit with them. Even if we don't see eye to eye on things, we always sit down and visit. We always end up walking out of there with a really good understanding of why we might think the way that we do. And all along the campaign trail, I've always said you've got the far right, you've got the far left, and the answer's somewhere in the middle. And you got to get to that middle point to find out where the answer is. There's a lot of weighing out the emails that we get, because we get pounded with a lot of emails, and you kind of have to weigh that out. And so I look at legislation. You've got to be able to have a conversation, because if you're not having a conversation, then we're not finding that right solution. And with the political climate that we're in today, there's so much, I want to say, anger towards one another. On the far right and on the far left, and we got to figure out how we get rid of that, how we're able to sit down and have a conversation, because I think that's the most important part. I've got a lot of friends of mine that are Democrat, and we don't see things eye to eye, but we have great conversations. One of the things that I've really, I guess be proud of that I was able to do. My first year in, I had someone that was texting me all the time, and I'd get these texts like, I can't believe you do that, or you vote that way. That's such a horrible thing to do. And I finally got it to where now the questions are being asked. And so when she asked the question, I email my answer back, and she goes, well, that makes a lot of sense. And so what happens when we actually ask the questions and hear the responses, that's when we're actually going to find out, wait a minute, maybe he's thinking common sense. Even if we don't agree, we're at least thinking things through. And so I think that's the important thing.
Representatives, thank you so much for your time tonight and answering all these questions, and the audience too. I'm sure that some of them will want to meet with with you, but let's give them a round of applause. And thank you guys for showing up tonight as well and asking fabulous questions. I hope you have a good evening.